Today, we're diving deeper into the Derry sewers, as who wouldn't want to chase a killer clown with their childhood friends that they hadn't seen in 27 years? But before we jump into the sewers, I had to stop off at my local video store and rent part 2 of the TV miniseries, Stephen King's It. So grab your inhalers and grab your slingshots, because we're about to find out if Pennywise the Clown is scarier the second time around. I'm glad to see that you made your way back from the Barrens after we ended the episode last week. If you're watching this episode, then your childhood might have been scarred by Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise the Clown. We left off with the losers hopping on planes and trains and automobiles as they headed back to Derry to take on Pennywise the Clown one last time. So, let's jump back into Stephen King's It, Part 2. Bill looks to be the first one back in Derry. He gets checked into the hotel and drives through Derry and lands ultimately at the cemetery where his brother was buried. While remembering Georgie, Pennywise decides there's no time like the present to let Bill know that he has taken the liberty of digging all of the losers' graves. Bill then heads to the Derry library and sees Mike for the first time in 27 years. They catch up as they head to Mike's house. They ponder on the energy they had all those years ago and hope it's still with them. Mike surprises Bill with Silver, his old bike. This triggers a memory of being chased by Pennywise with Stan all those years ago. Richie is back in Derry and gets a rude awakening real quick, as Pennywise is quick to welcome him back to town. He shoots to the library, but Mike is not back. While waiting, a rattled Richie hears the voice of Pennywise the Clown as he releases hundreds of balloons in the library, full of blood. Pennywise lets him know that if he stays in Derry, then he will die just like all the others. While Pennywise is working on his comedy set for his next open mic, Richie gets the hell out of Dodge. Mike and Bill get Silver back up and running. We montage our way through these two reliving the good old days. They pull out a pack of bicycle cards only to drop them, and well, let's just say that Pennywise is hard at work to run these two out of Derry. Ben is in a cab heading to Derry. He passes by the Barrens and heads back down all by himself. He thinks he's having a flashback to his encounter with Bowers, but it turns out to be real kids just chasing another fat kid. Ben helps the kid and again hears the voice of his father near the swamp. He approaches and doesn't see Pennywise this time, but sees a skeleton float. A homeless dude runs Ben off, and he's back in the cab. As they get back on the road to Derry, Ben sees Pennywise the Clown hitchhiking on the road. He turns around and a balloon tells him, just like the rest, to head back right now. Eddie Kasparek shows up at the local drugstore to get a refill for his inhaler. He remembers Mr. Keene trying to tell him about his mom being a hypochondriac about him, but little Eddie refused to believe him at the time. Well, now in 1990, Eddie sees Mr. Keene and wants to thank him for the advice. Well, for a moment, it's not Mr. Keene, as Pennywise has possessed this old man's body and tells little Eddie to beware and calls him a girly boy. Beverly is out to make amends with her old man. She sees Marsh on the doorbell, but quickly realizes it said Kirsch, not Marsh. Mrs. Kirsch gives her the news about her father's passing and invites her in. She accepts and approaches the sink that spit blood at her all those years ago. Luckily this time, nothing happens, and she sits down for a nice cup of tea. We find out that Mrs. Kirsch is in fact Pennywise. It morphs into a dead body and gives chase to Bev. She barely makes it out alive as she turns around to see Pennywise laughing at her. She is almost hit by a truck and turns again to see the house is fully boarded. Bill's wife Audra looks to be on her way to the United States in order to chase Bill. Mike has set up a reunion dinner at a local Chinese restaurant. One by one, they all show up and greet each other. Bev sees all the losers together for the first time and faints. Once revived, they all begin to go into detail about their encounters with Pennywise the Clown that day. Realizing that Stan was nowhere to be found, They decide to go on with dinner. We get another awesome montage of laughter as, well, the Loser Club is back together for the first time in almost 30 years. They begin to talk about Henry Bowers and how he confessed to all the murders once they got out of the sewer. We get a cutscene as Pennywise needs Henry's help and tells him he needs to kill them all. We end the dinner with a good scare as the fortune cookies are all handed out. Now, at the local library, they attempt to call Stan, but find out that he had committed suicide the night before. They share the story of the mummy Stan had seen earlier in the park that summer. They all need a drink. As they open the fridge, balloons come flying out as it's revealed to be the severed head of Stan Uritz. It mocks the Losers Club, obviously as this being Pennywise the Clown. The lights go out and the windows are blown as rain begins to come down inside. They join hands just like in the sewer and use their energy to fight it in the library. Now, Belch shows up from underneath the bed and helps Henry break out of Juniper Hills. Back in the hotel, the plan is beginning to come together as Mike wants to go back into the sewer. Well, not everybody is on board with this plan, but Mike shares more stories about it having a stronghold on Derry and everyone in it. He shows them the photo of Georgie. Audra, now in the United States, shows up in Derry and Pennywise makes a beeline for her and abducts her into his deadlights. They all share more stories as well. It's almost morning. So Mike, Ben, and Eddie go upstairs to freshen up. Ben is met by Bev as she knows it was him that wrote that poem all those years ago. They start making out and it's revealed that this wasn't Bev, but in fact, Ben was kissing Pennywise the Clown. Mike is then met by Henry Bowers, who nearly kills him. Eddie and Ben force their way in, and Bowers ends up dead due to a knife wound. They load Mike into Richie's rental and head to the hospital. Ben and Beverly finally have their connecting moment. We find out that Mike is going to live. Bill goes to talk to Mike. As he and Mike are talking, Mike tells him to check his pockets. Mike had gone down and found the 2 silver bullets years ago while Pennywise slept. Still not sure what they were doing, they cover Bowers' body up in the hotel and seem to be leaving town altogether. Bill sees a young kid who is sitting at a piano. Not sure if it was real or not. He decides that the time is now and Pennywise the Clown must die. They agree and head to the Barrens and back into the sewer. Once back in the same place where they fought Pennywise the first time, Georgie's boat comes down the stream. Bill fights off the ghost of Georgie as they call out Pennywise the Clown. This time though, he shows up as a floating image and tells the Losers Club to get bent as they don't have a chance. They are then led to a secret cave and find out that it is a giant spider. Bill finds Audra in the web. They go to fight the spider but are hypnotized in its deadlights. Eddie tries to fight it but is caught up by the spider and is dropped as Bev takes her shot and shoots out the deadlights. With Eddie dead and the rest of them not wanting to come back to Derry when they were 70, they set out to find the spider and end its life once and for all. The end of the film, we find out that Ben and Bev marry and are pregnant. Richie lands some movie. Mike is looking to move on, but Bill has to beat the devil as Audra is still under its control. He loads her onto Silver and takes her for the ride of her life. The speed brings her back and they embrace in the middle of the intersection. Stephen King's It, the miniseries, definitely rocks. This series scared a generation of kids back in the early 90s. How could you not be scared going to sleep knowing that Pennywise the Clown might be hiding in your bathroom sink? I really do think that Tommy Lee Wallace did a great job with what he was given for this movie. Now, you can check out the doc that came out a couple years ago detailing the story of this production, as it's pretty good. My memory of Tim Curry always goes back to his portrayal of Pennywise the Clown. This frightened me to my core when I was 4 years old. That's right, I said 4 years old! My parents thought it was a great idea for their 4-year-old to watch Stephen King's It when it first premiered on ABC. What the fuck were they thinking? From there forward, I was obsessed with this movie and the book. I know I've read that book from front to back at least 4 times over my childhood. How can a kid not love the story of the Losers Club coming together to fight Pennywise the Clown? This always stimulated my imagination at a very young age. I think after watching this film again, I'm not so sure why everyone complains about part 2. Sure, that's when the spider shows up at the very end, but you still get so many great scares with Pennywise the Clown. Honestly, I think part 2 holds up just as much as part 1. Next time you're near a sewer opening and you see a balloon and hear your name, go get a gun and a silver bullet and blow that clown's face back to space where it fucking came from. So until next time, I'll see you at the video store.